Online, you have this term, gangstalking, that's floating around. There are trolls using it just to get attention. And there are also attention seekers on YouTube and on Vimeo and in other places who are claiming to be quote-unquote targeted individuals, but it's a hoax. So in this video, I want to explain to you what ritual harassment is. I'm using the term ritual harassment because that describes better what it is. Gangstalking, many people have many imaginations with it. Some say it's just artificial intelligence that targets people when you say things against the government. Others say that, well, it's the government itself going after people. You have many interpretations of gangstalking. But what does it come down to? Ritual harassment. In this video, I want to explain why ritual harassment happens, what the purpose of it is, and how you can and should overcome it. Look, it happens that the shadow government, that means the wizards, target people. It happened throughout history, okay? And it is true that you have corporations that stalk some of their customers. Such things happen. But the ritual harassment goes further than this. And the ritual harassment is often enacted by common people, not by initiates into the occult. Even though initiates in the occult often lead ritual harassment projects. Okay, I'm going to give some scenarios to you, just to illustrate you why ritual harassment happens. One day, you have Annie. Annie was arrested by the British colonial patrol. She was called a witch, and she was about to be hung for performing witchcraft in one of the British colonies, and witchcraft was forbidden. The problem is that Annie couldn't even read, and witches had to read from old books. So that was an indication already that she was not a witch. And in that time, to be inaugurated into witchcraft, you had to be conscious of what you were doing. And you had to be trained in old rites. You had to memorize all kinds of weird prayers, which were written down. So there was a lot of self-study involved. It was impossible for her to be inaugurated. She couldn't even read. And Annie wasn't even that intelligent to begin with. But now, the whole town was convinced she was a witch, she was harming the community. And people wanted to see her die. So this was something quite serious. Eventually, Annie escaped because one of the judges had a plan to hang a dummy instead of her. So the population thought that it was Annie that died, when meanwhile they transported Annie to some other place. This was the only one, that was the only target that escaped with assistance of a judge. Now, why was Annie targeted? What did she do? Truth being told, she didn't do anything to provoke nor cause the violence against her. This was going on in the village. There was this woman who cheated on her husband. Well, such things happen throughout history, that marriage partners tend to be, well, not faithful to one another. So, okay, it happened. But here's the worst part. She got a sexually transmitted disease, which she then transferred to her husband. And here's another thing. When the husband got the disease, the doctor realized that this disease can only come from having unsafe sexual activity. The doctor realized, or better, the physician realized, okay, this man is a loyal husband and a loyal father. He's not doing such things. So then the physician realized, oh dear, there's trouble here. The physician kept it to himself. He gave the man some herbs to eat to reduce the symptoms. But that woman kept screwing around here and there. Yeah, that's what she was doing. And she spread the disease throughout the community. So after a while, many men in that community had the disease. And this thing, the 5 other men she cheated with, besides the one that gave her the sexually transmitted disease, they were not even aware she was married. She pretended to be a widow, or she pretended to be a teenager. Those are youthful looks, so she deceived them. So she made many men sick in that community. And those men were after not aware they were infected, so now after a while the whole community was infected. So now people were enraged in the community because there was this disease in the community. But that this woman that was cheating, it wasn't actually a secret she was cheating. People knew she was complaining about her husband way too often, and people knew she was often away from home, away from her kids, so people knew something was going on that didn't add up. But people kept quiet because they wanted to retain peace in the community. They didn't address her on her cheating and what she was doing, neither did they inform the husband that his wife was unfaithful. They just want to be left alone. And by them pursuing this policy of see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, or better said, because they pursued this code of silence, they enabled her cheating behavior. And because they did that, they contributed to her bringing sickness in the community. And now, a lot of people are upset. They want to know where does this come from. But people don't want to address the matter. Especially people who know what actually happened. Because once this comes to the light, there's going to be a lot of fights. The fights are going to escalate, and the community will never be the same again. Probably the community won't even exist anymore. So the wife that cheated, together with one of her friends who were aware of what she was doing, they began to talk bad about Annie. They began to contact Annie often to ask her to come over to help them out. So Annie did. Annie often came to help them out with course in their households. Meanwhile, they were complaining behind Annie's back, saying that Annie was coming after them, that Annie kept bothering them, that Annie was stealing from them. They began to lie about Annie. Even though the lies were unbelievable, and some people thought, man, it doesn't add up. How come this thin girl steals so many stuff? Where is she hiding it? She can't even read. Some people knew she couldn't read. So people thought this goes too far. But nevertheless, there was already anger and resentment in the community, though the diseases that were around. So now when the negative attention was placed on Annie, as a magnet, it drew all the negative energy from all other people towards Annie. So people who didn't even knew Annie suddenly couldn't stand her. Or people who've known Annie for years and had no issues against Annie, suddenly they were bitter against her. Why? Because Annie was victimized by witchcraft, and this caused a wound in her energy field, and this became a mark of victimization, or a mark of victimhood, that drew negative attention to her. So when all the negative energy, when all the negative attention of the community was on Annie, now people wanted to be relieved from their bitterness, and their bitterness was drawn towards Annie. So they thought Annie was the cause of their bitterness. So now they want to take action against Annie to be freed from that bitterness, even though the bitterness came from them. It had nothing to do with Annie. So people began to pay attention to Annie. They began to watch her every move, and eventually she was accused of witchcraft, and during that time, one of the women in that town had in that community had a miscarriage. So that was the event that triggered it. People said enough. An innocent woman lost her baby, and a life was destroyed. Annie needs to go. So Annie was arrested. That's how it went. Now, in this scenario that I've given on to you, it's clear that Annie was not to blame. If there was a dysfunction in the community that the community did not want to address. Because they now enabled this dysfunction escalated into a harmful defect, into a defect that harmed the community. So now that the dysfunction turned into a defect that harmed the community, now people had no choice but to deal with the harm that came from this defect. But people were focused on the harm, on the incidents. They were seeing the symptoms but didn't see the cause. But people sense already if we have to deal with the cause, things may turn out ugly. So they wanted to divert the negative attention away from the defect. So instead, there was a substitute target for the frustration and resentment of the population. So ritually, this Annie was harassed. People began to pay attention to her. People began to pay attention to her every move. Now, this example I've given on to you, that's how ritual harassment works. There is a defect in society, or there's a defect in the community that folks don't want to address. They really don't want to address it. They refuse to address it. They walk away. They're fleeing from the defect, even though the defect is kept in existence by their own contribution. But for them to acknowledge this means they need to acknowledge their own contribution. It means they need to face themselves. And this is something they don't want to do. They just want to flee, want to be left alone. So because they have this narcissistic urge to flee, they don't want to deal with what's haunting their community. So they want to divert the tensions away. That's what it is. And you will have leaders in that community. They don't really have to be the government or the royals, but you can have leaders in that community that see what's going on and they agree together, okay, we need to divert attention away from this issue, because if this continues, it gets out of hand. So the leaders then look throughout the community, and when they see someone that's quite vulnerable, they will conduct witchcraft, or sometimes, if it's a group of men, black magic on that individual, and as a consequence, the mark of victimization or the mark of victimhood will make that individual a magnet for all the frustration and all the disappointment and all the negative energy in that community. And it will be the common people in that community, that will feel comfortable dumping their aggression on that target. But after, they're not even aware why they're doing it, but after a while they know they're doing it, but even then they don't want to look at themselves. So then they will look for excuses to blame the victim. That's how it goes. Now, in the modern day world, this can happen at the workplace. Then the boss is involved. Or it can happen at college, it can happen in a sorority fraternity, it can happen in church. It happens everywhere. And in many cases, I'm not saying all cases, but in many cases, the local authorities are aware of it. So the prosecutors, the judges, the lawyers, the legal system is aware of it. Now, ritual harassment is against the law in most countries. But those that rule the world know very well that they can't uphold those laws at all times. They know that in practice, they often have to put the law aside to secure the functioning of society. That's why even in the laws, That's why even in the legal systems in the world, there is this clause or there is an article in which a judge can suspend, or not suspend, a judge can dismiss a case. If prosecuting a case, if prosecuting a violation of the law would bring too much harmful consequence on the community, the court of law will decide we're not going into this. Let's say, for example, that there's a corruption case in which the boss of some company received hush money from criminals. Now, normally, the law ought to be enacted. The prosecutor who finds out about this will prosecute that boss, and he may receive a fine or he may even go to jail. But let's say now that this boss may own a consultant office. Let's say that the criminals that paid him hush money are also involved with charity organizations. Now, you can say the law was broken, so the criminals need to be arrested, and also those charity organizations need to be closed. But then, the president of the court, because in many places you have the judges, and the judges are led by a president, and many of those judges, I'm not saying all of them are warlocks also, so it's actually a warlock cabinet that's hidden like that. They will come together, and when the president of the judges looks at the case, he tells them, no, 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 no. It is a law, it's written that we should prosecute that boss, and we should go after those criminals, and we should take action against those charity organizations, but we're not going to do it. One of the judges tells them, sir, if we don't do that, how can we remain standing as a justice system? Then the president tells them, look, if we enact the law as we're appointed to, we will be doing our job. But if we enact the law in this case, people will lose confidence in one another. And when people lose confidence in one another, it will lead to paranoia, it will lead to toxic suspicion, and this eventually will result in a lot of violence. And a lot of folks are going to get hurt. And once the folks are hurt, we can't undo the harm. We don't have enough jails to lock all those people up. We don't have all those finances to maintain all those prisoners. So we need to operate in a manner that keeps things at ease in the community. So in this case, we can't enact the law. Those charity organizations, they serve a beneficial purpose to this community. If we expose those charity organizations, this community is probably finished. And nobody wants that. So in this case, the judges know, okay, nobody's going to prosecute that boss. But they need to make sure that attention is diverted from this issue. So after a while, the judges, together with some civil servants, they themselves will point out that there's corruption going on in the community. And there's bribing going on. And this upsets people. But at the same time, they will point the finger to some YouTuber that's uploading videos. So suddenly, a lot of folks are angry with YouTuber. And you may think, what does this YouTuber that uploads videos from time to time has to do with financial corruption in the community? In this case, it's the legal system itself that's involved in the conspiracy. Why? Because they want to redirect attention away from the scams that the charity organizations were doing. Because they knew if this comes out, they can't manage the population anymore. It's going to affect interpersonal relationships, it's going to affect families, marriages. They know the consequences are going to be too high. So they're not going to prosecute it, but instead they are using their judicial resources to target some guy who had nothing to do with the case. For some folks, this may seem a bit odd that the legal system would go after someone that's innocent. But let me tell you, it happens. It happens. When it's necessary to calm down the population, they will do it. And common people who are holding on to the government will not go against it because they don't want to go there thinking that the governments may do something against the best interests of their population. You have folks like that, so they will, so in this case, support the targeting of that YouTuber, even when the allegations of the prosecutors don't add up at all. Have you ever witnessed that? That someone was charged and had to appear before courts, but when you look at the charge, nothing adds up? That's what's going on. There's some other defect in the community that's causing harm, and the legal system is used by the state to divert attention away from that thing that's going on. And that doesn't mean that everyone in the legal system in that place is aware of it. It can be that only some judges or some prosecutors are aware of it, because often they are member of warlock cabinets. So it's the warlocks doing it. But because those warlocks work in the legal system, people look at the legal system, they don't see that they are warlocks. That is what ritual harassment is. It's a ritual to bring relief to the population. It's a ritual to release tensions from the community. And the way this tension is released is by putting the focus on a third party. And this third party can't be strong, because if he or she is strong, that means that they will fight back, and fighting back can lead to escalation. They can't be too weak either, because if they are too weak, then folks will see the cruelty for what it is, and that may bring on harm. So it needs to be a vulnerable victim that it needs to be a vulnerable victim that can endure the targeting for a moment, because that's the purpose of ritual harassment, that someone is targeted for a while. Common scapegoating, you just want someone gone, just to be left alone. With ritual harassment, you want someone to remain alive and be around, to be victimized over a long period of time, so that the population is relieved. That is what ritual harassment is. That's why it's conducted. And it's conducted far more often than people realize. How to deal with ritual harassment? First of all, when you notice symptoms that you are the victim of ritual harassment, don't ignore it. Don't panic, don't freak out, but don't ignore it either. What are the symptoms that you are likely the target of ritual harassment? First of all, you need to be in prayer. Okay? Because the symptoms I'm about to share with you don't always, let me say, those are symptoms. But when things like that happen, it doesn't always have to be that you are a target. Okay, let's give an example. Let's say someone has a headache. Okay, now there are many reasons why you can have a headache. It can be that someone knocks you out, and that can be the reason you have a headache. It can be that you hit your toe, and now your brain is processing the pain symptoms. It can also be that you have an infection in your body, and that's why your head is itching. The headache can mean so many things, or it can just be that you haven't slept well. So how do you know whether the headache relates to someone has slept well, or whether something dangerous like an internal infection? Let's say someone has a headache and think they have an internal infection, even though that's not the case at all. That's what I mean. Just because something happens doesn't mean that automatically means this or that. When it comes to identifying whether you or someone is a target of ritual harassment, you need to look at the bigger picture, look at the context. You check the symptoms, but you also check the context to see where the symptoms come from. That's what doctors do when they are checking you with tests in hospital. They don't just look at the symptoms, they look at the context. Now look, What are some symptoms, or let's say possible symptoms, that you're the target of ritual harassment? One, you'll have people approaching you with unusual kindness. For example, let's say you have been living in a place for a while and almost nobody bothered with you. People just did their own business, they know you're there, but they didn't really bother with you. Out of the blue, a lot of folks show interest in you. They want to be friends with you, or they ask how you are. That can be a red flag. Now, it can be that it just happens that people notice you and they notice what you're doing in the community and they just want to be kind to you. That can also happen. It doesn't have to be something wrong, but it can be a red flag. So then you need to look at the context. Why are they suddenly interested in me? If you notice that before they used to ignore you, and now they suddenly have interest, and then you know that something's up. Another thing is that some people that used to be around you suddenly avoid you. Let's say your name is Francine and you had Becky, and Becky used to be good friends with you, and Becky often came at your place, but suddenly Becky ain't coming anymore. And you're asking, why isn't Becky coming anymore? There was no fight, there was no argument. So then you begin to think, what's going on? And not only isn't Becky coming anymore, many other folks also stopped contacting you. And you look at the situation and you see there is no wrongdoing on your part, and you think if there was a disagreement or a misconception somewhere, that you could have talked about it, and you realize now that the whole situation is weird. That's a red flag also. Let me explain these two symptoms. When folks suddenly have an interest in you, out of the blue, and you can't put the context why they have an interest in you, it is because you've been selected as a target. And now, a lot of folks are murmuring about you behind your back. So others that heard the murmuring want to figure out why they're murmuring about this woman so much, or why they're murmuring about this guy. So then people will begin to look for you to see what's going on. They're not going to tell you that others are murmuring behind your back, but they will become friendly with you to find out information about you, to see whether the allegations against you are true. They will not tell you that there are allegations against you or there's contention against you, but they want to figure out things on their own terms. And some of them are what they call in the conscious community flying monkeys. They're just sellouts. They will only come to get information to give to those that are targeting you. So that's the first symptom. The second symptom, when people just suddenly disappear from you, has to do with the following. When you are the target of ritual harassment, you are often not aware of it yourself. You'll just be doing your business. You'll just be doing your daily thing in your daily life. But others will hear and notice others looking angry at you. They will notice rage against you. You may not notice it. And those people will sense danger coming towards you. Now, they may not tell you about all the rage and all that against you because they don't want to upset you, but they don't want to be collateral damage. Also, because that's the thing, when you are the target of ritual harassment and you have folks hanging around with you, sometimes those other people around you may be targeted also because they are associated with you. Because they are around you, they may suffer too from the violence that comes against you. So when folks realize that you are the target of some kind of rage or some kind of collective anger, they tend to lower contact with you, or sometimes even break contact with you. For example, today we have social media, so I can use social media also as an example. If you have people suddenly unfriending you or suddenly blocking you, and you know very well that there was no fight, there was no anger, there was no contention at all, and let's say a lot of people did this, then you go through your post on your social media to see what may have posted that offended people, and you realize you didn't post anything offensive on your page. You're not even on social media often, so yet people keep blocking you and unfriending you. It is because behind the scenes there's contention against you, and those people are aware of it, and they want to keep themselves safe. So they remove any association they had with, they break any association they had with you, so that when things escalate or when the time bombs go off, they're not harmed by it. So that's also a red flag. So when you have people suddenly unfriending you in a period in your life or blocking you on social media, that's also a sign that you might be the target of ritual harassment. So, what are other symptoms? These symptoms I'm going to mention, be careful because they don't have to indicate that you're the target of ritual harassment, but they can be. Let's say you have a lot of headaches suddenly. Normally, when you have a headache, you think, okay, did I sleep well? Did I eat something wrong? You're going to look for the natural causes of the headache, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when you are the target of ritual harassment, first of all, you are the target. You will endure psychic attacks. You will endure energy attacks on your life, and all this negative contention that's thrown at you by people raging about you, it will affect your body. So you may feel as if you're being stabbed in your stomach, even though there's nobody stabbing you. You may feel as if life is flowing out of your body, as if you're dying. Well, that's not the case. You may flee. You may feel chronic fatigue, like you go to bed early, you sleep enough, but during the day you're so tired often, but you can't explain why you're tired. You're always tired. You're always sleepy. That can be a sign that you're the target of ritual harassment. Now, if it's a medical condition because you don't have enough vitamins in your body, okay, then that's the case. But if it's not something biological, then it's something spiritual. And if it's something spiritual, it implies that you are the target of contention. And that means that sooner or later, either there will be a physical altercation against you, or there will be sickness developing in your body due to all the stress that the psychic attacks cause to your physical body. And this may lead to you developing cancer or some other disease that may lead to your early death. So when you have chronic fatigue or chronic headaches, or you just feel down just like that, even though everything in your situation, everything in your circumstances are all right, then that is a red flag. So what do you do when you notice the symptoms? You go into prayer. You keep on praying. You decree the promises of Christ. And you decree repercussions on every evil spirit and every witchcraft and every wizardry conducted against you. You take action in the spirit every day. And while you're doing this, not only will you experience relief from those symptoms, but also you will hear reports. And you will see people exposed for what they are. So let's say now, for example, you feel tired often. This is something I've experienced a few times. And there are people going through the same thing. So I'm not reading this out of a book for you. I'm telling this from experience. Let's say you have this chronic fatigue for a while. You're so tired. And you think, why am I so tired? I sleep 8 hours a night. My bed is comfortable. I eat enough. Why am I so tired? You realize that there is no medical or biological reason for you to be tired. So you begin to pray. You read the Psalms. You decree the promises of Christ. You read in Scripture that no weapon formed against you shall prosper, so you decree that. So you also decree that no gossip against you shall prosper. It's also read that every tongue speaking against you in judgment thou shalt condemn. So that implies that every time negative contention comes towards you, you send it back to your senders. You send it back to those that send it because their tongue brought it on you, So they have to deal with it. It's not you taking revenge on them, it's you taking action to preserve your safety. There's nothing wrong with taking action to guard your safety. That's common sense and that's natural. So in the spirit, you begin to decree and declare, and you do this for a few days, and after a few days, you're not tired anymore. You're not. But then, let's say a week after the chronic fatigue disappeared, someone tells you in a text message, let's say your name's John. There's something I need to tell you, but I don't want to say it on Facebook Messenger. Can I meet you at the Starbucks? So you meet at Starbucks, and this colleague tells you, John, the boss is sick. He's in the hospital. And you think, what happened to him? And then the colleague tells you, John, I want to keep this between us, but I heard that the boss wanted to fire you because he was fed up with you. He was murmuring, complaining about you. And a few days back, let me say past week, he was going crazy. He was screaming, shouting, accusing you of a lot of stuff. He had a psychosis. And this psychosis exhausted him. He couldn't sleep well and all of that. That's why he's in hospital now. John, I'm telling you, get another job as soon as possible. Now what happened here? You noticed symptoms of something bad was going on, and you took action spiritually. And because you took action spiritually, the root was dealt with. And now because the root was dealt with, the real thing was exposed, what was going on. Now, such similar things I've experienced. That I had this chronic fatigue, or chronic headaches, or maybe it's not something physical, but I often lost objects, or my laptop crashed often, or my internet connection was kind of blurry. When I had such things happening, I went into prayer. I went into the supernatural offense against what was going on. And later, very soon, it was exposed what was going on. I'm telling you, you need to be alert. There are people out there that become the target of ritual harassment, and they even die, due to accidents that happen to them, or due to violent incidents against their lives, or due to dysfunction of their body, because their bodies were so worn out by the psychic violence against the body that eventually they died, due to some sickness, or due to the body just not functioning anymore, or in the case of heart attacks and all of that. There are folks dying early because of ritual harassment. It happens. It's a crime that goes unreported, and it's a crime that folks often want to talk about. It can be that it's happening to one of your parents, or to one of your children, or someone that's under your influence. If that's happening, you intercede for them. And when you intercede for them persistently, sooner or later you'll hear what's going on. And listen to what I'm saying here. If you had a time in your life when you had chronic fatigue, or your bank account was malfunctioning in a weird way, and even people at the bank couldn't understand why you wanted to withdraw money, but you couldn't do it because there's no restriction on your account. Your account is good. You have good credit at the bank, but still there was dysfunction in you using your bank account. Even people at the bank couldn't understand what was going on. Let's say you have such things happening, and you went into prayer, and suddenly people vanished from you. Then you know that either those people were the perpetrators of the psychic violence against you, or they're related to people that agreed against you, and now, because you took action in the spirit, consequences happened to the perpetrators. And now the perpetrators are, as in the world, pissed off, and they become homicidal, and the people associated with them know that sooner or later something very bad may happen to you. So that's why now they vanish from you. When such things happen, rejoice and keep on going. The, the best way to anticipate ritual harassment or gangstalking is to remain active in prayer, fasting, and making decrees and declarations in line with Christ. Now, I'm talking to believers now. I'm not supporting nor promoting anything paranormal. You have people in the world that use paranormal assistance, and they do similar things that believers should be doing. But they only get the relief. They don't get any deliverance. And that's the problem with paranormal things, is that you get relief but no deliverance. When you operate in the supernatural, that's in the power of the Holy Spirit, with prayer, decrees, declarations, fasting, all of that, you deal with the root. When you deal with the root, you're free from the danger. If you use paranormal assistance, you will be relieved from the danger, but the danger will still be there. And once the charm or whatever you're operating under fades away or expires, the danger is bigger than it used to be. When you walk in the supernatural, you dissolve the danger, you deal with it from the root. So, that's this video about ritual harassment. When you see that's happening, do not ignore it. Agree with Christ. Walk by faith, walk towards everyone, but don't walk in love with everyone. Be at